20-year restoration and then sat for 10 years. So there's been quite a lot of work to get it suitable for the road. The Datsun Fairlady Roadster, different markets call them Roadsters and Fairladies, was actually introduced in 1961, just pre-MGB. A lot of people say it was a copy of an MGB, but it actually came out before the MGB. It was initially produced as a 1500 by Datsun, which is part of Nissan, and then they introduced the 1600, and the same year as this car, 1967, they introduced a 2-litre, which had up to 250 horsepower, so it was quite a little hot rod, and that ran through to 1970 when the 240Z came out. These are very similar to the British sports car, really. They were, I guess, a copy of the MGA. This is actually more like an MGA under the skin than an MGB, in that it's got a separate chassis, and then they basically went their own way with the Americans to offer very good spec cars with radios and so on built in, whereas and built-in heaters as standard, whereas the British sports cars all had those as extras at the time. So they were sold as a good value alternative, but by the time they got the 2-litre engine in it, it really was quite a lot quicker than an MGB. So in America, they realised after a while that to boost the image, they wanted to get into racing. So they supported Bob Sharp, Peter Brock also, who designed the Cobra Daytona Coupe. He ran a team with these Datsuns. They also raced in the Monte Carlo Rally. Hannu Mikkola came 9th in 1968 in a very similar car to this, but with the 2-litre engine, and he was the first front-engine rear-wheel drive car home. It was considered not very suitable for the snowy conditions in the Alps in the winter. So it's got quite a history, and they carried on being very competitive in American SCCA racing, sports car racing, right into well into the 70s, although the main thrust of Datsun by then was with the 240Z, obviously. Right, people have asked why I've ended up with a Datsun Fairlady Roadster. Now the thing is, when I was 21, I worked with a girl from Texas who had brought a car with her, and I bought it, and about 2 months later I got a company car. So I sold it and sort of regretted it, because it was quite an interesting thing to have a car that nobody knew about. So a couple of years ago, when I stopped motor racing, I sold the car and thought I'd better have something for the garage. Then I contacted a chap who runs a website for these, and he said, oh, well, I've got a spare one in the garage. So I went to have a look at a barn in Derbyshire, and there it was, two, one his, one mine, and bought it. So we dragged it home and had a good look. Now if I open the bonnet, the first thing I did was have a look at the fluid levels, and I pulled the whole reservoir off the master cylinder because there were no clips holding it on. So I thought at that point I need to rebuild the brakes properly. The front brakes on this are actually from the same as an E-Type Jaguar and certain Ferraris. They're Dunlop calipers, and having looked into it all and tried to get reconditioned ones and so on, I bit the bullet and went to BG Racing and got their billet aluminium ones. So I got the brakes working, then we looked at the engine, and there were quite a lot of bits missing. There's an oil feed to the distributor that just wasn't there, things like that. There was no filter on the fuel system. So I cleaned the petrol tank out completely, renewed some lines, and put in new filters, rebuilt the carburetors, and got the engine running. just in time for the sheer hill climb 18 months ago, where I got the MOT. It ran nicely up to that, and on the final run up the hill, I used a few more revs and the oil pressure suddenly dropped. So I came home and took the engine out. So we've rebuilt the engine as well, and the gearbox. The rocker shaft studs had pulled out in the head. So that's all been rebuilt now. The tyres that it came on, they were normally supplied with steel wheels, which I've got, but the tyres were dated in the early 70s from Australia, so I thought even though it had passed an MOT relatively recently, they probably shouldn't be used. So it was cheaper to buy a set of wheels with tyres from John Brown Wheels than it was to restore the other ones. I think moving to the interior, somebody had covered the original seats in a sort of nasty grey check colour, and the foam had all dissolved inside and the webbing had gone. So to get the car on the road, I got a pair of Mazda seats, which is a common mod for these cars. And I have to say, they're other people find them very comfortable. I sit a little bit high in the car, and I probably could do with the original ones back in sooner than later. So that's another project to do. The other project is the steering wheel, because the original steering wheel has a foam boss in the middle with a badge in it, and that had all dissolved. So I need to get one of those. And in the meantime, I've put a MGB Motor wheel on it. I made my own boss kit to modify something I got from Taiwan to make it fit, and it sort of looks the part of the English Roadster that it isn't.